Hey guys, I'm Sunny Galt with Parents on Demand. We are a podcast network specifically for parents, families, caregivers. So be sure to check us out, parentsondemand.com. We'd love to have you join our network or perhaps just listen to some of the shows. Now, one of the things we love to do as a network is to help our members and educate them about important podcasting topics. And we've all either included music in our shows, thought about including music in our shows. It is one of those sticking points. And so I thought, let's do a video on this. So joining me today is Gordon Firemark. He is an entertainment media and business lawyer. He's a friend of mine, and he also has his own podcast called Entertainment Law Update. Gordon, thanks for being with us today.
Hi, Sunny. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's just dive into this. So when it comes to music copyright, there's a lot of players here. We usually just think about, the song in its entirety, but break this down for us because there may be multiple copyrights we would be infringing on if we just took a song and used it.
Right. So anytime you're using music in a show, unless you're actually performing the music yourself, you're dealing with two copyrights. The first one is the composition, the work of the songwriters. They wrote the song and created it before it was ever recorded. And so that work, that song is a work standing on its own. We call that the musical composition. Then there's a recording that's made, sometimes by the same songwriters, sometimes by others. And that recording is a separate work of copyright. That's actually a derivative work because it's based on the underlying composition. But someone else generally owns the recording. So with the song, the musical composition, that's either owned by the original authors, the songwriters, or their music publishing company. And the recording is owned either by the artist that recorded it or by their record company. So you have two-stop shopping every time you want to use one of these recordings because you have to get permission to use both the recording and the underlying composition. So it gets challenging really fast. And it's even more challenging when the song was written 30, 40, 50 years ago and the authors have died and left it to their children who've left it to the grandchildren. So now you've got 16 authors or owners that you have to get permission from. The publishers are sort of responsible for doing that if it's a published song. And I guess that's sort of good news. But you may have multiple publishers in the equation too. So it's tricky early on.
Yeah. So if you hear a song that's on the radio, it's copyright. Okay. You can't take that. So I think we've kind of established that. Is there a time though where the music or the composition was so old that it kind of negates, violating a copyright? Tell us about that.
So two layers to this. One is the public domain. There are works that are old enough that the copyright in the song has expired. For example, the tune to Happy Birthday is now considered to be in the public domain, although there was a lawsuit over just this issue that ended just a year or so ago. The point is that it was written in the late 1800s by these two sisters, and then there were adaptations and changes and recordings and things made, and that was why they claimed that it was brought up into the modern era. But the court said, no, the original composition was written, long enough ago that it's not protected by copyright. The duration of copyright protection for modern material, anything created after 1978, is the life of the author plus 70 years. So if the author is still alive, if the songwriter is still alive, it's protected by copyright. If the record company, and if it's a company-owned work, it's going to be 95 to 125 years, depending on certain circumstances. So it's a good long time. Rule of thumb, if it's about 100 years old or older, it's probably in the public domain. But there aren't a whole lot of recordings that are more than 100 years old. So when you go to the recording side, it's a good chance that you're dealing with something that's protected by copyright, except the copyright law had a weird wrinkle. Up until very recently, works created prior to 1972 were not entitled to any copyright protection for the recording. So recordings or anything since 1972 is protected. So that's going to be most of the kind of pop music that people want to use in their show. So think about it. Just assume it's recorded.
I know. I was just going to say that the kind of songs we're going to want to use in our podcast, just assume that it's copyrighted, most of it. But there are independent music creators and stuff like that produce content. I remember, this is kind of dating myself and my experience in producing content online, but when Creative Commons first came out, tell us a little bit about that. What do you know about Creative Commons and using that kind of music if it's labeled as such?
Well, Creative Commons is one way that an author of a work can say to the world, hey, go ahead, feel free to use this. You don't need anything more than this statement from me. It's not a waiver of copyright. It's a license that's granted. And it usually has conditions, like sometimes you have to do a share alike, which means the work you create also has to be Creative Commons or a non-commercial use only or those kinds of things. So it's a conditional license that's granted in advance to anybody who wants it, basically. Just sign up here and it's yours. That's one way that works can be available for use in podcasts and other kind of media. Be wary of those conditions. There's also the royalty-free music libraries, which are basically companies that have songs in their catalog that are available for a one-time fee instead of having to pay royalties for each use. And that one-time fee might be as little as $5 or $6. It could be hundreds of dollars, just depending on the song and how popular and the nature of what you want to do. But you can sign up with these libraries and or just buy an individual piece of work from one of those libraries. And then there's the third kind, which is sort of what we call the pod safe music, right, where you essentially are signing up for a membership in a service that as long as you remain a member of that thing, you can use the music from their library in your shows. Any show released during the time that you're a member, you have the right to use it in the ways that are described in their license. All of this is a function of the contract, the license agreement that they provide you when you do the Creative Commons, buy from the royalty-free service, or do the library.
Yeah, we've seen more of the PodSafe type of music and services pop up. And I'm really glad that this is happening, because I think this is something that podcasters have really struggled with. Again, kind of being in the Wild West going, well, we're not going to necessarily jump through all these hoops and hurdles for a podcast, So it's kind of nice, to kind of see that come in. I guess one of the downsides could be that, again, if you're looking for, man, I need something that sounds like the Beatles. I don't know if you're really going to find, you're not going to get that very specific music unless you get permission. So let's talk about that now. And if you're set on a piece of music, there's copyright that's part of it. How do you go about getting permission?
Well, getting permission for use of a copyright is the same process, no matter whether it's music or a poem or a book or anything. You find out who owns it or who controls the rights. You go and you ask for permission, and you get the permission in writing. Usually that's a form of a license agreement. What's really troubling with music, and one of the reasons that we're seeing these pod-safe music services pop up, is that in the music arena, the rights are already very divided up. As I said before, you've got the recording, but you've also got the music publishing, the writing side of it. And within those, you've also got the divisions of who collects the money for which kinds of uses. So the publisher collects the recording, the right to use the composition when you're embodying it in a new work, like your podcast episode. That's called a synchronization license. But when it's playing as a stream, that is something called the performance right. And there are organizations in every country in the world. Here in the US, there are ASCAP and BMI and CSAC, and GMR is the third one, that are performance rights societies, and they collect money for performances of works. But they only collect for broadcast and certain kinds of works. There's an organization that collects for sound recordings, but only certain sound recordings, called Sound Exchange, and that they collect for digital streams of sound recordings. The record company wants a master use license when you incorporate the work. So my point is, there are 5 different sort of components. You've got the stream and the download that you have to get permission from for both the composition and the recording. So it's 5-stop shopping, and that's a real hassle, and it's almost impossible for the average podcaster to do it. So some of these companies have gotten involved in negotiating these kinds of deals with publishers in advance, so you can access that material.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as a podcaster, I'd be pulling my hair out.
As a lawyer, I did.
Is that what happened? Just kidding. What about crediting people for music? Like, is that ever a pass? Like saying, hey, this music is made, this person wrote the song, this person,
So very often giving credit is one of the required terms of a license agreement if you're getting permission. If you haven't gotten permission, giving credit to the song is what I like to think of as a smoking gun. You said, hey, we know it. We didn't create this. We're using, so-and-so's music. And by the way, we didn't get permission. So here it comes to us.
Okay,
It's a little risky.
Right. Okay. What do you think are some of the common mistakes podcasters make when it comes to using music in their shows?
Well, one common mistake is assuming that making a podcast is just like making a radio show, and all the radio shows use bumper music all the time. And in fact, some radio shows are all about playing music for the whole show. Not the same thing. And radio stations pay that public performance license to ASCAP and BMI and CSAC and GMR. Every year they do a blanket licensing, and they have to actually keep track of what songs play how many times for how many minutes and all kinds of crazy stuff. So, acting like it's a radio show is just not going to be the same. Podcast is a different animal in a lot of ways. Another big mistake is, just using it without permission in the first place, not even thinking about it, or I'm only using 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And then relying on the fair use exception, which is generally not going to work very well in the music space, because that 10 seconds might be the most important hook part of the song.
Right.
And your show, if you have sponsors, your commercial use, there's all kinds of things. So relying on fair use is a big risk. And and then another one is, giving credit. That can be dangerous if you're not getting permission.
So I had something that I went through. This is several years ago now, maybe 10 years ago. I produced a television pilot. It was a local pilot here in the San Diego market. And we had a theme song, and I really wanted to use a theme song. And you remember the band? Was it Collective Soul? I think that's the name of the band. And it was from Collective Soul. And I was dead set on using this piece of music, but I wasn't going to put something on TV that wasn't, I didn't have access to, or the rights to. And so, you know what I did? I went to the website and I emailed Collective Soul, and they forward the email to, again, you would know this better than me, but whoever was kind of in charge of all this.
Yeah.
And they didn't, I think I paid like a $25 fee, and they gave me the rights to be able to use this. So I say that so that people don't necessarily feel like it's hopeless. Again, this was a long time ago, before a lot of internet content and whatever, and things may be different now. But if you are dead set on a piece of music, like, what is it going to hurt to reach out and just say, hey, is this possible? Because I got a killer deal and was able to get exactly what I wanted.
Right. I'm aware of at least one podcaster who uses a very well-known pop song from the late 70s as the opening for his show. And my understanding is that he pays $100 a year for the right to do that on his episodes.
But if
like
you're
$2 an episode.
Yeah. If you're doing, weekly episodes or whatever, that's a steal, to be able to just pay $100 to have exactly what you want. So it's not impossible. I know our heads spin when it comes to all of this, but again, I'm really glad that there are more pod safe options out there. If I were doing this over again, honestly, that's probably what I would do. One thing we didn't talk about is having someone create work specifically for your show. That's always an option too. I think that could probably be more on the expensive side, but then you would get the rights to that and you'd be able to use it, right?
Well, it might be that someone in your circle is willing to do it for free or cheap, or a percentage of something, or, there's all kinds of ways to pay for it. But it's the best case scenario is to have, first of all, I think it's great to have an original theme song created anyway. And when you do that, you just want to make sure you have a contract with the composer and the recording people that says this work belongs to you. It's a work made for hire for the producer of the show, so that you own it outright.
Another great resource that I found is Fiverr, because I needed some jingles created for a podcast, more like stinger jingles. Like, I had a bunch of segments in my show and I wanted something to kind of take me from one segment to the other. I went on Fiverr and there was someone that was producing these jingles for $5 a pop, and you got the complete rights to it and everything. So that, it's not always super expensive.
Yeah, don't despair. There are good options out there in the pod safe, the royalty free, and of course, the custom made stuff that you can get from the online services. Just be sure that you're getting the rights that you need, and that it's not a one-time use kind of a license. But it can be very affordable, and it's certainly worth looking into.
All right. Awesome. Gordon, how can people find you online and learn more about all the awesome stuff you're creating?
You can find out all about me on gordonfiremark.com. All of the different things that I offer are available there. My law practice is at firemark.com, and I have a blog about entertainment law. And of course, my Entertainment Law Update podcast is at entertainmentlawupdate.com.
Perfect. Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you.